My life was almost ended by a phone call to the police, but my war was just beginning, thanks to a single phone call to the Pentagon. The air in that quiet, tree-lined cul-de-sac was thick with the sterile scent of grief. I'd just spent 2 hours with Maria Evans, the new widow of Sergeant First Class David Evans. He'd made it through 3 tours in the most God-forsaken corners of the world, only to lose the final battle in his own garage 2 weeks ago. My dress blues were hanging in my hotel room. A visit like this from his commanding general was better done in civilian clothes. A simple, dark pantsuit, my hair pulled back in its regulation bun. I wanted to be a person to her, not just a uniform delivering condolences. We cried together. I held her hand while she showed me pictures of a smiling, vibrant man I only knew as a rock-solid NCO. I promised her the Army would not forget her, that I would not forget her. And I meant it. Stepping out of her perfectly manicured suburban home felt like surfacing for air. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns. I walked towards my rental, a bland but functional silver sedan, digging in my purse for the keys. That's when I saw it. A police cruiser, rolling down the street at a speed that was deliberately, predatorily slow. It passed Maria's house, the officer in the passenger seat tracking my movement, and then pulled a U-turn, its tires whispering on the clean asphalt. It came to a stop about 15 feet behind my car, blocking me in. The light bar wasn't on, but the message was just as clear. I stood still, keys in hand, and waited. 2 officers got out. The driver, a man in his late 40s with a chest puffed out like a pigeon, and a mustache that seemed to sneer all on its own, swaggered towards me. His partner, younger and leaner, hung back a few paces, his hand hovering near his sidearm. "Evening, ma'am," the older one said. His name tag read, Miller, Iki. The way he said ma'am wasn't respectful. It was a verbal pat on the head. "Everything all right here? You look a little lost." I met his gaze, my posture straightening out of pure, ingrained habit. "I'm fine, officer. I was just leaving." "Leaving," he drawled, looking from me to the expensive house, then back to my face. His eyes catalogued my black skin, my severe suit, my rental car. The unspoken question hung in the air. "What are you doing here?" "We got a call. A suspicious person casing the neighborhood. Said someone was walking around, looking into cars. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" My blood ran a little colder. A suspicious person. In a neighborhood where I was likely the only black person for a square mile. The math wasn't difficult. "Officer, I was visiting the woman who lives in that house, Mrs. Evans. Her husband, Sergeant Evans, was one of my soldiers. He recently passed away." Miller's smirk didn't falter. He exchanged a look with his partner, a quick dismissive flick of the eyes. "One of your soldiers, huh? That's a good one. What are you, Salvation Army?" The condescension was a physical thing, a sour taste in the back of my throat. I'd commanded battalions larger than this entire town's police force. I'd briefed 4-star generals and congressional committees. I had never, in my entire 28-year career, been spoken to with such insolent disrespect. I kept my voice level, the way my father, a command sergeant major, had taught me. Never let them see you sweat. Never let them break your bearing. "I am a brigadier general in the United States Army," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "And I am here on official Army business. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch." I made to move past him. He shifted his body, blocking my path. "Whoa, whoa, slow down there, G.I. Jane. A general? You?" He chuckled, a low, ugly sound. "You don't look like any general I've ever seen. Let's see some ID. Ace." With slow, deliberate movements, I reached into my jacket's inner pocket. I pulled out my wallet and extracted my military identification card. The card was crisp, official, with the Department of Defense hologram shimmering in the fading light. It clearly stated my name, Eva Rostova, my rank, BG, and showed a picture of me in my Class A uniform, a single star gleaming on each shoulder. I held it out to him. He took it, holding it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were contaminated. He squinted at it, then held it up to the light. "This is a pretty good fake," he said, a note of faux admiration in his voice. "Almost looks real. Where'd you get it online?" "Officer Miller," I said, my patience, a resource I normally had in vast reserves, beginning to fray at the edges. "That is official, government-issued identification. You can run the DoD ID number on the back. You are currently impeding a general officer in the performance of her duties. I suggest you return my property and allow me to be on my way." "Or what?" he challenged, stepping closer. I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You gonna call in an airstrike on me, sweetheart?" The word sweetheart landed like a slap. My training, my entire life's discipline, screamed at me to remain calm, to de-escalate. But a different part of me, the part that had earned that star, the part that had buried too many good soldiers like David Evans, was done being polite. "Return my ID, now." My voice was no longer flat. It was the voice I used on the command deck, the one that made colonels straighten their spines. It had the opposite effect on Miller. His face hardened, the folksy condescension replaced with raw hostility. "You know what? I think we're going to take a ride downtown. We'll figure out who you really are there. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back." I didn't move. I simply stared at him. "You are making a catastrophic mistake, officer. A mistake that will have consequences you cannot possibly imagine." "Is that a threat?" his young partner Davis piped up. Finally finding his voice, he unclipped his handcuffs. "It is not a threat, officer," I corrected him, my eyes still locked on Miller. "It is a statement of fact. You are about to arrest a flag officer of the United States Army on a baseless, racially motivated complaint after she has properly identified herself. I want you to think very carefully about your next action." Miller just laughed. "Last chance, lady. Turn around." I stood my ground. My heart was a cold, steady drum in my chest. I thought of Maria Evans, alone in that house, her life shattered. I thought of the promise I'd made her, and I thought of the sheer, unadulterated arrogance of the man standing in front of me. He made his decision. He lunged forward, grabbing my right arm and twisting it behind my back with a grunt of effort. The sudden, sharp pain was a shock, but the violation was worse. Instinct took over. My body tensed, not to resist, but to root itself. I was an unmovable object. Davis moved in on my other side, and together they forced my hands behind my back. The first cuff clicked shut around my wrist, the cold steel biting into my skin. "You're under arrest for impersonating a military officer and resisting arrest," Miller grunted, breathing heavily right next to my ear. He fumbled in my pockets, pulling out my phone and the rental car keys, dropping them into an evidence bag. As they marched me towards the back of the cruiser, my mind wasn't on the humiliation. It wasn't on the pain in my shoulder. It was a cold, clear, calculating machine, just as it was when a supply convoy was ambushed or a critical mission went sideways. I was already running through protocols, assessing the situation, and planning my counterattack. They shoved me unceremoniously into the back seat, the plastic partition pressing against my knees. The door slammed shut, sealing me in a cage that smelled of cheap air freshener and desperation. Miller got in the driver's seat and looked at me in the rearview mirror, a triumphant smirk on his face. "See? That wasn't so hard. Now you can tell all your war stories to the folks in booking." He started the car. I watched Maria Evans's house recede through the rear window, a beacon of sorrow in this pristine, perfect neighborhood. My promise to her echoed in my mind. They thought they had won. They thought I was just another woman, in the wrong place at the wrong time, who they could bully and discard. They had no idea who they had just put in the back of their car. They had no idea of the storm they had just unleashed. I leaned forward as far as the partition would allow, my voice low and steady, cutting through the crackle of the police radio. "Officer Miller." He glanced in the mirror, annoyed. "What?" "The phone you took from me," I said, my eyes meeting his in the reflection. "I need it back. I need to make one phone call." He scoffed. "You'll get your phone call at the station, General." He spat the title like an insult. "No," I said, and the absolute certainty in my voice made even him pause for a split second. "I need to make it now. You need me to make it now. It's a direct line. To the Pentagon." Miller let out a short, barking laugh that filled the small space of the cruiser. He adjusted the rearview mirror to look directly at me. "The Pentagon? Oh, that's rich. Lady, I've heard it all. I once had a guy tell me he was a secret agent for the CIA on a mission to save the world from mole people. You're gonna have to do better than that. This isn't a request, officer, I stated, my voice as cold and hard as the cuffs on my wrists. It's a protocol, a mandatory procedure for an officer at my level. It's called a secure chain of command notification. I was improvising the term, but it sounded official enough to land with authority. When a flag officer is detained or otherwise incommunicado, that notification must be made immediately. Failure to do so initiates a series of escalating alerts. Davis, the younger partner in the passenger seat, shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't looking at me, but I could see his eyes darting towards Miller, seeking reassurance. He wasn't finding it. Miller's bravado was a thin veneer over a core of pure belligerence. Escalating alerts? Miller sneered. What's gonna happen? Is the National Guard gonna rappel down and bust you out? No, I said calmly. Something much quieter, and much worse for you. Right now, a system at the National Military Command Center is tracking my official phone. It knows my last registered itinerary was a condolence call at this address. It also knows I haven't checked in. In approximately 20 minutes, my status will change from delayed to unaccounted for. When that happens, an automated query will be sent to the state police dispatch. They will contact your dispatch. They will ask your supervisors why 2 of their officers are at the last known location of a missing U.S. Army general. I let that sink in. The cruiser was silent except for the low hum of the engine and the occasional squawk from the radio. I could see the gears turning behind Davis's eyes. He was doing the math. Miller, on the other hand, just gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. He saw my words not as a warning, but as a challenge to his authority. You watch too many movies, he grumbled and stomped on the accelerator. The car lurched forward, leaving the peaceful suburban street behind. The drive to the station was short, maybe 10 minutes through darkening streets. Every second that ticked by was a victory for me, and another shovelful of dirt on the graves of their careers. They didn't speak a word. Miller stewed in his own anger, while Davis kept glancing nervously back at me, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He was the weak link. He was the one who knew, on some level, that this was going very, very wrong. They pulled into the sally port of the police station, the garage door rumbling shut behind us with a grim finality. The place smelled of disinfectant and despair. Miller hauled me out of the car, his grip on my arm unnecessarily tight. We walked through a set of heavy steel doors into the booking area. The fluorescent lights were an assault, buzzing with a headache-inducing frequency and casting everything in a sickly, greenish-white glow. A portly sergeant with a face like a collapsed pudding sat behind a high counter, typing with 2 fingers on a keyboard. He looked up as we approached, his expression one of pure, soul-crushing boredom. "What did you bring me, Miller?" the desk sergeant asked, his voice a monotone drone. "Got a live one, Sarge," Miller announced, puffing out his chest again. He shoved me forward towards the counter. "Found her casing a house over in the Oaks. Claims she's a general in the Army. Gave me a fake ID and everything." The sergeant looked me up and down, a flicker of something maybe amusement, maybe pity, in his tired eyes. "A general, huh? 4-star or 5-star? "Just one for now," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the tiled room. "All right, funny girl, let's get this over with," Miller snapped. "Empty your pockets." "You've already taken my property, officer," I reminded him. He slammed the plastic evidence bag containing my wallet, keys, and phone onto the counter. The sergeant sighed, pulled out an ink pad and a fingerprint card. The mundane routine of it all was surreal. Here I was, hours after comforting a grieving widow, about to be inked and processed like a common criminal by men whose tactical understanding wouldn't pass muster in basic training. "Name?" the sergeant grunted, his eyes on his computer screen. "Rostova, Eva. Brigadier General, United States Army. Service number." Miller cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Just put Jane Doe for now, Sarge. We'll figure out her real name after she's had some time to think about it in a cell." That was the line. That was the point of no return. A holding cell meant I would truly be incommunicado. My phone would be logged in evidence, my one link to the world severed. The time for quiet warnings was over. "Before this proceeds one step further," I said, my voice dropping into the full timbre of command, the parade ground voice that could cut across a roaring helicopter engine. Every man in the room, including 2 other officers milling about, froze and looked at me. I am formally invoking my right to a phone call, and I am formally advising you, Officer Miller, and you, Desk Sergeant, that you are now in violation of Title 18, Section 1385 of the United States Code. You are knowingly and unlawfully obstructing and detaining a federal officer in the performance of her duties. Every action you take from this moment forward adds years to the federal prison sentence you will both be serving. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. The desk sergeant stopped typing. Davis looked like he was about to be sick. Miller's face was a mask of pure fury. My defiance, my refusal to be broken or intimidated, had pushed him over the edge. He wanted to humiliate me. He needed to prove to himself, and to everyone else in that room, that he was the one in charge. He snatched my phone from the evidence bag. Fine, you want your call? You got it. Let's all hear it. Let's hear you call the damn Pentagon. He thrust the phone at me, his eyes blazing with manic glee. Put it on speakerphone. I want everyone to hear the pizza guy on the other end. I took the phone, my cuffed hands making the movement awkward. I ignored the smirks and the expectant silence. My thumb, which had been trained to operate battlefield communication devices under extreme duress, moved with practiced precise speed across the screen. I didn't go to my contacts. I went to a secure communications app buried in a folder. I pressed a single icon labeled Vanguard 7. The phone didn't even ring. There was just a single, solid, electronic thump as the encrypted connection was established. Miller leaned in closer, a triumphant sneer already forming on his lips, ready to mock the dial tone he expected to hear. Then a voice came through the speaker. It was male, impossibly crisp, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was a voice forged in windowless rooms where decisions that shaped the world were made. It did not say hello. It did not ask who was calling. It said one word. Watchtower. The single word hung in the sterile air of the booking room, a stark, alien monolith of sound. Watchtower. It wasn't a question. It was a prompt, a digital handshake. Miller's sneer faltered, melting into a look of slack-jawed confusion. The other officers, who had been enjoying the show, straightened up. The desk sergeant's fingers froze over his keyboard. They had all expected a confused friend, a wrong number, maybe a fast food joint. They had not expected a voice that sounded like it was being broadcast from a bunker 3 miles beneath the Earth's surface. My eyes never left Miller's. I held the phone steady, my cuffed hands a testament to his colossal miscalculation. "This is Vanguard 7, I said, my voice clear and even. "I am invoking Protocol Jericho." There was a half-second pause on the other end, the sound of a sterile silence, not a deadline. Then the voice returned, just as flat. "Vanguard 7, state your authentication." "Authorization code, Sierra Delta 90 Echo Tango." Miller's face was turning a blotchy red. "What is this? What kind of joke is this?" he hissed, reaching for the phone. I shifted my body slightly, shielding the phone from his grasp without breaking my composure. "I wouldn't do that, officer," I said, my gaze still locked on him. The voice from the speaker cut through his bluster. "Authentication confirmed. Vanguard 7. Your signal is live. We have your precise location. Transmitting audio and video feed to NMCC. State your status." "Status is compromised," I reported, using the concise language of the field. "I am unlawfully detained by local law enforcement. Officers are hostile. My name is Eva Rostova. My rank is Brigadier General. The detaining officers are badge number 714, Miller, and 822, Davis, of this precinct." As I spoke his name and badge number, Miller's face went from red to a pasty white. Davis, standing behind him, looked like he might faint. The desk sergeant, whose nameplate read Walsh, was slowly pushing his chair back from the counter, his eyes wide as dinner plates. He was starting to understand. Miller was still fighting it. This is a prank," Miller stammered, his voice losing its swagger, replaced by a high, reedy panic. "You got some friend with a deep voice, that's all. You're in a lot of trouble, lady. The voice on the phone answered his outburst directly, and the effect was electrifying. "Officer Miller," it said, with no change in tone. "You are currently being recorded on a secure channel monitored by the Department of Defense. Every word you say is being logged as evidence. You have unlawfully detained a flag officer. You have been positively identified. You are advised to stand down. Immediately." The air went out of the room. It was one thing for me to say it. It was another thing entirely for an anonymous, omniscient voice coming from a secure line to the Pentagon to confirm it. Miller looked at me, then at the phone, then at his partner. He was a cornered animal, looking for an escape that didn't exist. "Stand by, Vanguard 7, the voice said. "A military liaison has been dispatched to your location. ETA is 19 minutes. A support asset is also being routed to you. ETA is 7 minutes. The line clicked off. Not a hang-up, but a disconnection. Clean and final. The silence that descended was heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of a bomb shelter after the all clear, when no one is sure if it's truly over. I placed my phone gently on the counter. "Sergeant Walsh," I said, my voice returning to a normal conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than my command voice had been. "I believe now would be an excellent time for you to remove these handcuffs." Walsh swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his thick neck. He looked at Miller, who was frozen in place, a statue of impotent rage and dawning horror. Walsh made a decision. He was a man who followed procedure, and his instincts were screaming that the procedure had just gone off a cliff. He fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking slightly. "Don't you touch her," Miller bellowed, finding his voice again. It was a desperate cracking sound. "She's a prisoner. She's impersonating." His words trailed off, weak and unconvincing even to his own ears. "Shut up, Carl," Walsh snapped, his voice sharp with a fear that had finally boiled over into anger. "Just shut your damn mouth, you've done enough." He rounded the counter, unlocked my cuffs, and respectfully placed them on the counter. The relief of blood flowing back into my wrists was immediate, but I didn't rub them. I just stood there, letting my hands fall to my sides. "Thank you, Sergeant," I said quietly. "Now, I require my property, my wallet and my keys." Walsh nodded quickly, grabbing the evidence bag and handing it to me. I took my wallet out, opened it, and laid my military ID card on the counter next to my Department of Defense civilian ID. "Run the numbers, Sergeant. You should have done this 20 minutes ago." As Walsh scrambled back to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a newfound urgency, the station's main phone line began to ring. It wasn't the normal chirping sound of an outside line. It was a loud, insistent, jarring buzz. A red phone on the wall that I hadn't even noticed before was flashing. The hotline. Walsh answered it on the first ring, his hand trembling. "Precinct 12, Sergeant Walsh speaking." "Yes, Chief." "Yes, sir, I understand." "No, sir, Yes, sir, she is here." "I'm aware of that now, sir." "Yes, sir." He hung up the phone, his face the color of ash. He looked at Miller with an expression of pure contempt. "That was the Chief of Police," Walsh said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "He was just read the riot act by the governor's office, who was apparently called by the Secretary of Defense. Carl, what did you do?" Before Miller could answer, a new sound began to filter in from outside. It was faint at first, a distant, rhythmic chopping, but it was growing louder, quickly. It wasn't the sound of a news chopper or a medical helicopter. It was deeper, heavier, the thrumming sound of rotor blades that meant business, the kind of sound that rattled your bones and made the hair on your arms stand up. The lights in the booking room flickered as the sound grew into a roar, seeming to come from directly overhead. The other officers in the room were now backing away, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. Davis looked at the ceiling as if he expected the wrath of God to come crashing through it. Even Walsh was staring, mesmerized. Only Miller and I were looking at each other. His face was a canvas of terror, the final, undeniable realization of the abyss he had leaped into. I walked calmly to the heavy door leading out of the booking area. I didn't know what kind of support asset was arriving in 7 minutes, but I knew it wouldn't be knocking politely. I looked back over my shoulder at the two men who had arrested me. "Officer Miller, Officer Davis," I said, my voice calm amidst the growing chaos. I suggest you find a wall to stand against. And I suggest you do it now." The roar of the helicopter was no longer just a sound. It was a physical presence. The entire building vibrated with the percussive thumping of the rotor wash. Dust motes danced in the fluorescent lights, and a coffee cup on Walsh's desk rattled its way to the edge and shattered on the floor. The sound was so immense, so overwhelming, that it seemed to be coming from inside the station itself, as if the building were developing a monstrous heartbeat. Davis, the younger officer, did as I suggested. He flattened himself against the far wall, his face pale and slick with sweat, his eyes wide with a primal fear. He looked less like a police officer and more like a terrified civilian caught in an action movie. Sergeant Walsh, ever the pragmatist, was already crouched behind his high booking counter, peeking over the top like a soldier in a trench. But Miller was still frozen. He was trapped in a feedback loop of disbelief and terror, his mind refusing to process the reality that was literally shaking the foundations of his world. "They can't do this," he yelled, his voice barely audible over the din. "They can't land that thing here. This is a police station. We have jurisdiction." His words were a pathetic, desperate appeal to a rulebook that had just been set on fire. Jurisdiction. The concept was meaningless. A U.S. Army general had been unlawfully detained. A protocol Jericho had been invoked. The lines of jurisdiction had just been redrawn with a sledgehammer, and Officer Carl Miller was standing on the wrong side. The main doors to the station, heavy, reinforced glass, and steel suddenly flexed inward, then exploded in a shower of tempered glass and twisted metal. It wasn't an explosion of fire and smoke, but a concussive blast of air, a brutal, focused shockwave. Two figures, clad in black from head to toe, rappelled down from the darkness outside, landing in a perfect athletic crouch in the now open doorway. They weren't SWAT. Their gear was wrong. Sleeker, more advanced. They carried short-barreled rifles, held at a low ready, their movements fluid and economical. They were specters, shadows given form and purpose. Behind them, the source of the overwhelming sound began to recede slightly as the helicopter ascended, its job done. But now a new sound filled the void, the screech of tires and the slamming of heavy vehicle doors. Through the shattered entrance, I could see them. Two black, up-armored Chevrolet Suburbans had pulled up, their headlights cutting through the swirling dust and debris, turning the station's lobby into a chaotic stage. The two commandos in the doorway didn't enter. They simply secured the entrance, their weapons scanning the interior with unnerving efficiency. Then 4 more figures emerged from the Suburbans. These weren't soldiers. They were men in dark, impeccably tailored suits, but they moved with the same predatory grace as the commandos. They wore earpieces and their jackets were cut to conceal the hardware underneath. Federal agents, the kind you don't see on TV. The man in the lead, older, with silver hair cut in a severe military style and a face carved from granite, strode into the station as if he owned it. His eyes swept the room, taking in the cowering officers, the shattered glass, and me, standing calmly by the booking room door. He ignored everyone else and walked directly to me. "General Rostova," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. He didn't offer a hand, just a slight, respectful nod. "Agent Thompson, Diplomatic Security Service. The Secretary sends his apologies for the delay." "There was no delay, Agent Thompson," I replied. "You're early. The support asset wasn't due for another minute." A flicker of a smile touched the corner of his mouth. "We were in the neighborhood. When a Jericho goes live, we tend to break the speed limit." He glanced over my shoulder at Miller, who was now trembling, his face a mask of utter ruin. "I take it this is the individual responsible for this diplomatic incident?" The term diplomatic incident hung in the air. He hadn't called it a mistake or an unlawful arrest. He'd elevated it to the level of an international crisis. It was a deliberate choice of words, designed to strip away any last shred of local authority. "That is Officer Miller," I confirmed. "He and Officer Davis were the detaining officers." Thompson nodded slowly, his cold eyes boring into Miller. "Officer Miller," he said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming something that could freeze water. On behalf of the United States government, I am placing you under federal custody. You do not have the right to remain silent. We are waiving that right for you. You will speak, and you will answer our questions. Everything you say will be used to determine the depth of the hole you have dug for yourself and your department. Two of Thompson's men moved past him, their steps silent on the debris-strewn floor. They didn't draw weapons. They didn't need to. Their presence was a weapon. They flanked Miller, who seemed to shrink under their gaze. You can't arrest me," Miller whimpered. "I'm a police officer. This is my station." One of the agents, without a word, reached out and plucked the badge from Miller's uniform, holding it between his thumb and forefinger like a dead insect before dropping it to the floor. The small metallic clatter was the loudest sound in the now silent room. "You were a police officer," Thompson corrected him. "Right now, you're a national security liability. And we're about to find out if you are acting on your own, or if this precinct has a systemic problem." His gaze shifted to Sergeant Walsh, who was slowly rising from behind the counter, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. "Sergeant, you will secure every piece of video, audio, and data from the last hour. Your 911 call logs, your dispatch records, your body cam footage. You will not delete, alter, or misplace a single byte of it. A DoD cyber forensics team will be here in 15 minutes to take possession of it. Your cooperation will be noted." Walsh just nodded, his face grim. He knew a lifeline when he saw one. Davis, still plastered to the wall, was being quietly and efficiently cuffed by another agent. He offered no resistance, his relief at being removed from the situation palpable. Thompson turned back to me. "General, we have a secure vehicle ready for you. We'll escort you to Andrews Air Force Base. There's a C-12 waiting to take you back to D.C. "Thank you, Agent Thompson," I said, "but I'm not finished here." His eyebrow arched slightly. "Ma'am?" I walked over to the booking counter and picked up the phone. I dialed the number for the precinct's front desk, the one any civilian would call. A shaken-sounding dispatcher answered. "This is Brigadier General Eva Rostova," I said. "Put me through to your chief of police." "Now." There was a fumbled response, a series of clicks, and then a harried voice came on the line. "This is Chief Reynolds." "Chief Reynolds," I began, my voice steady and cold. "My name is General Rostova. I'm currently standing in the lobby of your main precinct, which is now under the temporary control of the Diplomatic Security Service. 2 of your officers are in federal custody. Your department is being investigated for civil rights violations, unlawful detainment of a federal officer, and potential sedition." "General, I apologize," he stammered. "I don't know what happened. I'm not interested in your apologies, Chief," I cut him off. "I'm interested in accountability. Your officer, Miller, acted not just with gross incompetence, but with malice. He was motivated by prejudice. That is not just a departmental problem. It's a cancer, and I'm going to make sure it's cut out." I paused, letting the silence stretch. Agent Thompson watched me, a look of profound respect on his face. I continued. "So here is what's going to happen. Your department is going to issue a public apology. Not to me, but to the family of Sergeant First Class David Evans, whose memory your officers desecrated today. You are going to personally deliver that apology to his widow, Maria Evans. And then, you are going to tender your resignation. Am I clear?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could hear his breathing, the panicked calculations running through his head. He was a small-town chief, a political animal used to managing budgets and dealing with the city council. He was not equipped for this. Finally, a broken voice came back. "General, you can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, my voice laced with the absolute authority of my position, an authority he was only now beginning to comprehend. "And I will. I have a direct line to the Attorney General. I have the full backing of the Department of Defense. You have until 0800 tomorrow to make your decision. But know this, Chief. If I have to make another phone call, it will not be to offer you a choice." I hung up the phone. I turned to Agent Thompson. "All right, Agent. I'm ready to leave now." As he escorted me out through the shattered doors, past the shell-shocked local cops and the silent, imposing federal agents, Miller's voice cried out one last time from behind me. "You're ruining my life," he screamed, his voice filled with a pathetic, self-pitying rage. I stopped at the threshold and looked back at him, a man completely broken by his own bigotry. I felt no pity, only a cold, hard sense of justice. "No, officer," I said, my voice carrying clearly back into the wrecked station. "You made a choice when you saw a black woman in a nice neighborhood and decided she didn't belong. You made a choice when you dismissed my identification. You made a choice when you put your hands on me." I let my gaze sweep over him, over Davis, over the entire scene of his self-immolation. "Your life was already ruined," I finished, the words landing like coffin nails. "You just didn't know it until today." The ride to Andrews Air Force Base was a silent, sterile affair. The black Suburban cut through the night, a bubble of federal power gliding through a world that was suddenly small and insignificant. Agent Thompson sat in the passenger seat, speaking occasionally into a concealed microphone on his wrist, his voice a low, indecipherable murmur. I sat in the back, the soft leather of the seat a stark contrast to the hard plastic of the cruiser. The adrenaline had begun to fade, leaving behind a profound weariness. It wasn't the physical exhaustion of a long mission, but the soul-deep fatigue that comes from fighting a battle you shouldn't have to fight in the first place. I stared out the window at the passing city lights, my reflection a ghostly overlay. In it, I didn't see a general. I saw Eva Rostova, the daughter of a command sergeant major and a high school teacher. I saw the young cadet who had to be twice as good to be considered half as equal. I saw the captain who led her soldiers through the dust and fear of Kandahar, and the colonel who navigated the treacherous political minefields of the Pentagon. Every step of my career, every promotion, every commendation had been earned through a relentless, unwavering commitment to excellence. I had built a fortress of competence and authority around myself, brick by painful brick. And tonight, a man like Carl Miller, with nothing more than a cheap badge and a lifetime of unexamined prejudice, had tried to tear it all down. He had failed, spectacularly. But the fact that he had even been able to try, that he could look at me and see not my rank, my uniform, or my humanity, but only a target for his contempt, that was the wound that still throbbed. We swept through the main gate at Andrews without slowing, the armed guards snapping to attention as our vehicle passed. On the tarmac, bathed in the stark glow of floodlights, a sleek C-12 Huron stood waiting, its twin turboprop engines already whining in anticipation. A flight crewman in a green jumpsuit stood at the bottom of the air stair, holding a salute as the Suburban came to a stop. Thompson got out and opened my door. "General, we'll have you in the air in 5 minutes. The flight plan is filed directly to the Pentagon's heliport. A car will be waiting to take you to your quarters." "Thank you, Agent Thompson," I said, stepping out onto the tarmac. The wind whipped at my pantsuit. "Your team's efficiency was noteworthy." "We take care of our own, General," he said, his expression unreadable. "Protocol Jericho is a rare beast. This is the first time it's been invoked on domestic soil. A lot of very important people are paying very close attention." "As they should be," I replied. I started towards the plane, but then I stopped. A thought, cold and sharp, cut through my fatigue. "Agent Thompson, one more thing." "Ma'am?" "Officer Miller, Officer Davis. They are federal detainees now. Where are they being taken?" Thompson hesitated for a fraction of a second. "A secure facility, General. They'll be debriefed." "Debriefed," I repeated. It was such a sterile, clinical word. "Agent, I want to know exactly what happens to them. I don't want this to be a headline for a day, only to see them quietly reinstated 6 months from now with back pay. I've seen that happen before." "General, I can assure you," he began, but I cut him off. "No, you can't," I said, my voice firm. "But you can make a call. I want a direct feed, audio and video, to their interrogation rooms. I want to see this through to the end." Thompson stared at me. It was an unprecedented request. A flag officer asking to monitor the federal interrogation of 2 disgraced local cops. It was outside of any protocol I knew, but Protocol Jericho had already thrown the rulebook out the window. He saw the look in my eyes, the unyielding resolve that had put the star on my shoulder, and he knew I wasn't making a suggestion. He gave a single sharp nod. It will be done, General. I'll have a secure link patched through to the aircraft's communication system. You'll have your feed. I ascended the stairs and entered the small, surprisingly plush cabin of the C-12. The flight crewman secured the door, and moments later I felt the aircraft begin to move. I strapped myself into a comfortable leather seat. In front of me was a small fold-down table and a built-in communication screen. As the plane taxied and then accelerated down the runway, the screen flickered to life. It split into two panels. On the left, a grainy black and white image of a small, featureless room appeared. Officer Davis sat at a metal table, his head in his hands, looking small and broken. The camera angle was from a top corner of the room. On the right panel, another identical room materialized. This one was empty. The flight was smooth, a low hum vibrating through the cabin as we climbed through the dark sky. For 20 minutes, I watched Davis sit there, alone with the wreckage of his life. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just sat. Then, the door to the room on the right panel opened. Miller was escorted in by two of Thompson's agents. They didn't shove him, but their hands on his arms were firm, guiding him into the chair with an authority that allowed for no resistance. The door closed, and he was alone. Unlike Davis, Miller was agitated. He paced the small room like a caged tiger. He ran his hands through his thinning hair. He muttered to himself, words I couldn't make out. He was a man coming to terms with the fact that he was no longer the one with the power. He was the one in the cage. The door to his room opened again. A woman entered. She wasn't an agent. She wore a simple gray pantsuit and sensible shoes. She carried a thin file folder and nothing else. She looked like a high school principal or a mid-level corporate lawyer. But her eyes, even on the grainy video feed, were like chips of ice. She sat down opposite Miller and opened the folder. She didn't speak. She just sat there, looking at him, letting the silence stretch and work on him. Finally, Miller cracked. Look, I want a lawyer. I'm a cop. I know my rights. The woman's voice, when she spoke, was quiet, but carried an incredible weight. It was the voice of someone who had never had to raise it to be obeyed. You are not a police officer anymore, Mr. Miller. Your employment was terminated by your chief 30 minutes ago, effective immediately, and you are in a secure federal facility. The rights you think you have are currently under review. My name is Ms. Graves. I'm here to help you understand the gravity of your situation. She slid a single piece of paper across the table. That is a copy of your initial charging sheet. Unlawful detainment. Obstruction of a federal officer. Assault. Those are the local charges we graciously allowed the state to file. They carry a sentence of, what, maybe 5 to 7 years. Miller scoffed. I'll get a good lawyer. It was a misunderstanding. I'll plead it down. Ms. Graves smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. You could try. But that's not the real problem, is it, Carl? The use of his first name was a deliberate, calculated violation. The real problem is the federal charges. She pulled another paper from the folder. This one is a bit more serious. It's a violation of Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. Because your actions were racially motivated, that comes with a sentence of 10 years. Per charge. Miller's face went pale. Racially motivated? You can't prove that. Can't we? Ms. Graves asked softly. We've already pulled your record. 17 excessive force complaints, all against minorities. 2 of them settled out of court by the city. We have your social media history, which is illuminating. We have testimony from Sergeant Walsh, who is being very cooperative. But even all of that is secondary. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The real problem, Carl, is that you didn't just assault a citizen. You assaulted a brigadier general. You didn't just obstruct a person. You obstructed a key node in the national security chain of command. You pointed a gun at the United States of America, and the charge for that is sedition. The word hit the room like a physical blow. Sedition. The screen showing Davis's room flickered to life with its own interrogator, but I couldn't take my eyes off Miller. His face had crumpled, the last vestiges of his defiance wiped away, replaced by a raw, naked terror. Ms. Graves leaned back. The sentence for seditious conspiracy is 20 years in a federal supermax facility. Now, we can talk about all of that. Or, you can tell me something I want to know. You can tell me who made the 911 call. Miller stared at her, his mouth opening and closing silently. We know it wasn't the widow, Mrs. Evans, Ms. Graves continued, her voice patient, relentless. We have her statement. The call came from a neighbor who reported a suspicious person. We want the name, Carl. We want to know who started this, because we have a theory that this wasn't just a random encounter. We have a theory that you were called by someone who knows you, someone who knew you would respond in exactly the way you did. She paused, letting the implication sink in. This wasn't just about a bad cop. This was about a conspiracy, a targeted act. Give us the name, Carl, Ms. Graves said, her voice now a silken promise of mercy. Help us, and maybe we can make the sedition charge go away. Refuse, and you will die in a concrete box. I leaned closer to the screen, my heart pounding. The 911 call. It had been the catalyst for everything. I had assumed it was just a nosy, prejudiced neighbor. But what if it was more? Who in that quiet suburban cul-de-sac would have a reason to target me? To set a trap using a man like Miller as their weapon? My mind raced, sifting through the details of Sergeant Evans's life, his service, his death, which had been ruled a suicide. On the screen, Miller's face was a war of terror and calculation. He licked his dry lips. He was going to break. He was going to give them the name. And as he opened his mouth to speak, the video feed from both rooms suddenly dissolved into a blizzard of static. The audio cut out, replaced by a loud, hissing screech. A red message flashed across my screen in stark, block letters. External signal interference. Secure channel compromised. The red warning pulsed on the screen. A digital heartbeat in the silent cabin. The screeching static was a physical assault. A shriek of violated security. My military instincts, honed over decades of dealing with signal interception and electronic warfare, kicked in instantly. This wasn't a technical glitch. A secure, encrypted military-grade channel doesn't just fail. It is attacked. It is deliberately and precisely jammed. My blood ran cold. The implications were staggering. Someone possessed the capability to interfere with a live Pentagon feed. Not only that, they knew when to interfere at the exact moment Miller was about to reveal the identity of the 911 caller. This wasn't a random act. This was a targeted, sophisticated countermeasure. The conspiracy Ms. Graves had hinted at was no longer a theory. It was a terrifying reality, and it was actively working to conceal itself. I unbuckled my seatbelt and moved to the front of the small cabin, leaning over the co-pilot's seat. The two pilots were already reacting, their faces illuminated by the green glow of their instruments. "What's our status?" I demanded, my voice cutting through the residual hiss from the speakers. The pilot, a young major whose name tag read Jensen, didn't turn around. "Ma'am, we've lost all satellite communication. Data links are down. We're flying blind, navigating on internal gyros and transponders only." "Jamming?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Widespread and powerful, General," the co-pilot confirmed. "Looks like a multi-spectrum electronic warfare attack. Civilian channels are down too. GPS is gone. We're in a complete blackout bubble. I've never seen anything like it over CONUS." CONUS. Continental United States. An EW attack of this magnitude on home soil was unthinkable. It was an act of war. Who has that kind of capability? I mused aloud, more to myself than to them. And why use it now? My mind raced. This was no longer about two rogue cops. Miller and Davis were just pawns, the tip of a spear. The real enemy was the one who had thrown it. Someone who knew my itinerary. Someone who knew which buttons to press to get a man like Miller to react. Someone with access to high-level military-grade jamming technology. And someone who was terrified of what that 911 caller's name would reveal. I went back to my seat, my mind a whirlwind of strategic analysis. I pulled out my personal tablet, a hardened military model, and tried to access the network. Nothing. Completely isolated. I was on a C-12 Huron, a glorified executive jet, not a B-2 bomber. We had no defensive or offensive electronic capabilities. We were a soft target. The plane banked suddenly, a sharper turn than was comfortable. I looked at the pilots. "Major Jensen, report." "Change of orders, General," he said, his voice tight. "We just received a burst transmission on a legacy frequency before the jamming went total, encrypted, from NMCC. And our primary destination at the Pentagon has been declared a high-risk zone. We are redirecting to Site R, the Raven Rock Mountain Complex, the military's massive underground command bunker in Pennsylvania. It was one of the primary continuity of government locations, a place you only went to when the world was ending. Going there meant the threat wasn't just against me anymore, it was against the chain of command. An hour later we began our descent, not towards a brightly lit runway, but towards a dark, looming mountain in the middle of nowhere. The landing was on a short, private airstrip nestled in a valley, invisible to the outside world. As soon as the wheels touched down, the plane was guided by ground crews into the mouth of a tunnel that opened in the side of the mountain. Massive blast doors, feet of solid steel and concrete, rumbled shut behind us, sealing us inside. The transition from the open night sky to the belly of the earth was jarring. The air inside the mountain was cool, dry, and smelled of filtered air and electronics. The moment the air stair was down, I was met not by Agent Thompson, but by a man in the uniform of an Air Force colonel. He was flanked by 4 heavily armed security policemen in full combat gear. "General Rostova," the colonel said, his salute crisp and perfect. "I'm Colonel Davies, base commander. Welcome to Raven Rock. Please come with me. The chairman is waiting for you." The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Markwell. My pulse quickened. The situation was escalating at a velocity I could barely comprehend. We walked through sterile corridors that echoed with the hum of ventilation systems, our footsteps the only sound. We passed through multiple security checkpoints, each more stringent than the last. This was the nerve center of the American military, and it was on high alert. Davies led me to a large briefing room deep within the complex. The room was dominated by a massive holographic display table, currently dark. Waiting there was General Markwell himself, a tall, imposing man with 4 stars on his shoulders and the weight of the world in his eyes. With him was a civilian I didn't recognize, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s with intelligent, wary eyes. "Eva," Markwell said, his voice a low rumble that always commanded attention. He dispensed with formalities. "Glad you're safe. This is Director Catherine Vance of the National Security Agency, the NSA." My blood went colder still. The jamming, the EW attack, it was their domain. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her eyes analytical, seeming to catalogue every detail about me. "General," Vance said, her voice precise, "we've been analyzing the EW attack. It was sophisticated, frighteningly so. It wasn't a brute force jam. It was a surgical strike. It targeted the specific frequencies of your secure channel and then created a localized blackout to cover its tracks. The source appears to be domestic, but the technology, it has the signature of a foreign state actor." "Russia? China?" Markwell asked, voicing the question on my mind. Vance shook her head. "It's not that simple, General. The methods are Russian, but the hardware has markers we've previously associated with a rogue element within Mossad. It's a hybrid, a ghost, something we haven't seen before." My mind reeled. This was spiraling far beyond a simple case of prejudice and abuse of power. I was a thread, and someone was trying to snip me, and in doing so they had revealed a much larger, more terrifying tapestry. "It was time to prevent Miller from identifying the 911 caller," I stated, bringing it back to the trigger point. "That name is the key." "We agree," Markwell said, his face grim. "Agent Thompson's team secured both officers. They're being transported to a black site. But Miller is useless to us now. The moment the feed was cut, he went into a state of catatonic shock. He's babbling, incoherent. Whatever he saw in Miss Graves's eyes, whatever he understood about the people he was protecting, it broke his mind. So the direct route was a dead end. What about the precinct's records? The 911 call itself?" Director Vance stepped forward. Gone, General. Wiped. The cyber-forensics team got there and found the precinct's servers had been remotely erased by a military-grade logic bomb. The attack happened at the same moment our feed was jammed. It was a coordinated, multi-pronged operation. They scrubbed everything. The call log, the recording, the source number, it's all just digital ash. I stood there, in the heart of America's most secure military fortress, feeling more exposed than I ever had in a war zone. We were fighting an enemy who could operate on our soil with impunity, who could wield the technology of a superpower, and who could erase their tracks with terrifying precision. They went to all this trouble for a reason, I said, thinking aloud. To protect the identity of one person in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Why? Who could be that important? General Markwell looked at me, his expression grave. That's what we need you to help us figure out, Eva. We think the 911 call wasn't the beginning of the operation. We think it was the middle. We think the real target was never you. I stared at him, confused. Sir? We've been re-examining the death of Sergeant First Class David Evans, Markwell said, his voice low. The man you were visiting, his death 2 weeks ago was ruled a suicide. The local police investigation was cursory. But Sergeant Evans wasn't just any NCO, Eva. For the past 18 months, he was assigned to a highly classified DARPA project. My breath caught in my throat. DARPA. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The bleeding edge of military technology. Director Vance picked up the thread. A project so sensitive, its very existence is known to less than 20 people in the country. A project working on next-generation artificial intelligence for battlefield command and control. Project Chimera. Us. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture of chilling clarity. The state actor technology, the focus on a specific suburban street, the violent, overwhelming effort to conceal the instigator. Sergeant Evans didn't kill himself, did he? I whispered. We don't think so, Markwell confirmed. We think he was murdered. We think he was about to expose something, and he was silenced. And we think his killer is the person who made that 911 call. He paused, letting the full weight of his next words land. Eva, the person who made that call knew you were coming. They knew your rank. They used you. They weaponized local law enforcement's bigotry to create a chaotic diversion, a smokescreen to cover their tracks while they scrubbed the final evidence linking them to Evans's murder. The room was silent. The truth of it settled over me, cold and heavy. I had been a pawn. My arrest, my humiliation, it was all just a sideshow, a piece of theater designed by a master manipulator. There's one more thing, Director Vance said, her eyes fixed on me. We managed to recover a single, heavily corrupted data fragment from the precinct's server before it was wiped. It's not much. It's not a name or a number. It's an address. She slid a tablet across the table to me. On the screen was a satellite map showing the quiet cul-de-sac where this all began. Maria Evans's house was marked with a pin, and right next door to it, another house was circled in red. That's the address the 911 call originated from, Vance said. We ran the property records. Ava, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this. I looked at the name listed as the owner of the house, and in that moment, in the cold, sterile bunker deep beneath a mountain, the entire conspiracy snapped into horrifying focus, because the name was not one of a stranger. It was a name I knew all too well. It was the name of a man I had served with for over a decade. A man I had trusted, a man I had once considered a friend. It was the name of the officer who had signed off on the initial report, ruling Sergeant Evans's death a suicide. The name on the screen seemed to burn itself into my retinas. Lieutenant Colonel, retired, Marcus Thorne. The world tilted on its axis. Marcus. Good-natured, reliable Marcus, who I'd served with at Fort Bragg. We'd come up through the ranks together, him in logistics, me in strategy. He was the guy who could get you anything, a C-17 on short notice, a pallet of spare parts that didn't exist on paper. He'd been a master of the system. He'd retired 3 years ago, citing a desire for a quiet life after 25 years of service. Apparently, his idea of a quiet life was living next door to a top-secret DARPA Project NCO and orchestrating conspiracies. Thorne, I breathed, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. It can't be. I'm afraid it is, Eva, General Markwell said, his voice grim. We ran his financials. For the past 2 years, he's been receiving substantial, untraceable payments into an offshore account. The amounts are consistent with high-level espionage. We believe he was Sergeant Evans's handler. A handler for what? I asked, my mind struggling to connect the man I knew with the traitor they were describing. If Evans was a mole, why kill him? That's the billion-dollar question, Director Vance interjected, her sharp eyes missing nothing. Our working theory is that Evans got cold feet. He was a good soldier, decorated, loyal. Maybe he saw what Project Chimera was truly capable of and decided he couldn't go through with it. Maybe he was going to blow the whistle. Thorne, acting on his employer's orders, had to silence him and make it look like a suicide. The cold, calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. Arrange a murder, then use the victim's grieving widow as cover. Use a visiting general as a diversion, and use the predictable prejudice of local cops as the ignition switch for the whole chaotic machine. Every move was precise, ruthless, and displayed a sickeningly intimate knowledge of the systems he was exploiting. He knew I was coming, I said, the pieces falling into place. Condolence visit protocols for NCOs who die stateside are standard. As Evans's ultimate commanding officer, a personal visit from me was expected. Thorne would have known that. He counted on it. He laid a perfect trap, Markwell agreed, and he almost got away with it. If you hadn't invoked Jericho, if you hadn't forced the issue, we'd still be thinking Evans killed himself, and Thorne would be a ghost. But he wasn't a ghost. We had a name. We had an address. We had the beginning of the thread. What's the status on Thorne now? I asked, my voice hardening. The shock was receding, replaced by a cold, familiar fury, the fury of command. A DSS team is en route to his house as we speak, Vance said, glancing at a tablet in her hand. Quiet entry. They'll take him into custody. They're 10 minutes out. It's too late, I said, a sudden chilling certainty washing over me. He knows we're coming. The EW attack, the server wipe that was his escape plan. He initiated it the moment he knew Miller had broken. He wouldn't stick around to be arrested. Even as I said it, Director Vance's expression tightened. The team is reporting in. The house is empty, General. Cleared out. Suitcases gone. Hard drives physically removed from the computers. He's in the wind. Of course he was. He was a master of logistics. Disappearing would be second nature to him. Markwell slammed a fist onto the briefing table, the sound echoing in the silent room. Damn it! He could be anywhere, on a private jet, over the border. No, I said, my mind racing, sifting through years of memories, of conversations with Marcus Thorne over cheap coffee in dusty forward operating bases. I was looking for a pattern, a tell, anything. He's meticulous. He's arrogant. He believes he's smarter than us. He wouldn't just run. He'd have a contingency, a fallback, a place he thinks we'd never look. I closed my eyes, picturing his office, his mannerisms. He was a collector of military history. He had a particular fascination with the Cold War, with the old chess match between the US and the Soviet Union. He loved stories of dead drops and numbers stations. He romanticized the analog age of espionage. He wouldn't use a plane, I thought aloud. Too easy to track. He wouldn't use a car to cross the border. Too many cameras. He'd go low-tech. He'd use the blind spots. I opened my eyes and looked at the two most powerful figures in the U.S. military and intelligence communities. Check the manifests for every commercial freight train that has left the state in the last 3 hours. Cross-reference it with any rail yards within a 50-mile radius of his home. Vance was already typing on her tablet, her fingers a blur. That's a long shot, General. The data is immense. Just do it, I commanded, my authority flowing from a place of pure instinct. Thorne once told me the only way to truly disappear in America was in the belly of its oldest infrastructure, on the rails or on the rivers. For 5 minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft tapping of Vance's fingers. General Markwell and I stood in silence, watching her. Finally, she looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and respect. "I'll be damned," she whispered. "There's a BNSF freight train, long-haul cargo, that departed from the Harrisburg Rail Depot an hour and a half ago. Its route passes less than 30 miles from Thorne's neighborhood. Its destination is the port of Baltimore. A cargo ship, Markwell breathed. He's planning on leaving the country in a shipping container. Get me a line to the DSS team leader, I said to Vance. Patch me through to the team on the ground at Thorne's house. Now. A moment later, a voice crackled in the room's speakers. Team lead, go. This is General Rostova, I said. I'm at Site R. I want your team to search the garage. Thorne was a classic car enthusiast. He had a 1968 Mustang he was restoring. He talked about it constantly. If that car is gone, I know where he is. Copy that, General. Moving to the garage now. Stand by. There was a moment of muffled sound. Then, General, we have eyes in the garage. It's empty. There's a clean spot on the floor. Fresh tire tracks. The Mustang is gone. He's not on the train, I said, the final piece of the puzzle locking into place with sickening clarity. He's driving to the train, the Harrisburg Depot. He's going to put the car and himself in a container and load it on that train. It's the perfect cover. No one would look for a classic car in a modern shipping manifest. Can we intercept the train? Markwell asked Vance. It's already moving through a dense urban corridor, she replied, pulling up a map on the main holographic display. The train was a green line inching its way towards Baltimore. Stopping it would cause a massive incident. We could have a team meet it at the port, but that's hours from now. He could switch trains, get off. No, I said, staring at the map. We can get him before he gets on it. The Harrisburg Depot has a 2-hour loading window for this specific train. He has to get there within the next 30 minutes. A DSS team from DC can be there in 45. It's too slow. My eyes traced the highways, the back roads. My mind was no longer in a bunker. It was on the battlefield, calculating angles of attack, response times, asset allocation. The Pennsylvania National Guard has an aviation unit stationed at Fort Indiantown Gap, I said, pointing to a location on the map just north of Harrisburg. That's a 15-minute flight from the rail yard. Get me the commander of that unit on the line. I'm requisitioning 2 Black Hawk helicopters and a platoon of their best men. They're going to intercept Thorne at the depot. General Markwell was already nodding, turning to one of his aides to relay the orders. Director Vance looked at me, a glimmer of awe in her eyes. I wasn't just a general who had been victimized. I was a weapon being aimed at the man who had targeted me. I took a deep breath, the cold, recycled air of the bunker feeling electric. We were no longer reacting. We were hunting. The trap Thorne had so carefully laid had been sprung, and now the hunter was about to become the prey. General Markwell, I said, my voice resonating with an authority that left no room for debate. I'm not staying here. I'm going with them. Thorne started this with me. I'm going to be the one to finish it. He looked at me, at the fire in my eyes, and he knew it was not a request. It was a statement of intent. He simply nodded. Godspeed, Eva. As I turned to leave with one of his aides to get to the helipad, Director Vance called out to me. General, one more thing you should know. I paused at the door. Project Chimera, she said, her expression impossibly grave. Sergeant Evans wasn't just working on it. He was the lead programmer for the ethical and behavioral fail-safes. He was the one building the cage for the monster. She let that hang in the air for a moment. According to the last fragments of data we recovered from his lab, just before he died, he initiated a full system lockdown. The AI is offline, completely isolated. So the project is secure? I asked. That's just it, Vance replied. And the look on her face sent a fresh wave of ice through my veins. The lockdown can only be reversed by 2 people, the project director and Sergeant Evans. But Evans built in one final, emergency backdoor, a vocal authorization protocol that can override the lockdown. It's keyed to the voice print of the person he trusted most in the world. She took a deep breath. He keyed it to his wife, Maria. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Maria, grieving, vulnerable Maria Evans, who I had held in my arms just hours ago, was now the unwitting key to unlocking a next-generation military AI. The conspiracy wasn't just about stealing the project. It was about gaining the one biometric key needed to control it. Thorne wasn't just fleeing. He was racing towards his final objective. and I had left her completely unprotected in that quiet suburban house. Get me a line to the local police, no, screw that. Get me Agent Thompson's personal cell. I snapped at the aide, my mind already 3 steps ahead. We were running through the corridors of Raven Rock, heading for the surface. Tell him to dispatch a federal team to Maria Evans's address immediately. Code 3. Tell him Thorne's target is the widow. My heart hammered against my ribs. Thorne wasn't going to the rail yard to escape. He was going there to rendezvous, to hand off whatever data he'd stolen from Evans, and then he was going back for Maria. Or worse, he already had her. The diversion he created with my arrest wasn't just to cover his tracks. It was to ensure that all law enforcement and federal attention was focused on me, leaving Maria isolated and alone. Minutes later, I was strapped into the command seat of a Black Hawk helicopter, lifting off from the mountain helipad and blasting through the night sky. The wind from the open doors was a physical roar, but inside my helmet, the comms were crystal clear. Below us, a second Black Hawk carrying the National Guard Quick Reaction Force kept pace. Vanguard 7 to Watchtower, I said into my mic, using my old call sign. What is the status of the target's wife? Director Vance's voice came back instantly, patched through from the bunker. Negative contact, General. The DSS team arrived at the house 3 minutes ago. The front door was forced. The house is empty. Mrs. Evans is gone. The confirmation was a cold weight in my gut. I had failed in my promise to protect her. Thorne had her. He has the key, I said, my voice dangerously low. Where would he take her to access the system? He can't, Vance replied. Project Chimera's servers are at a secure DARPA facility in Maryland. He can't get in there. The only other access point is a hardened mobile terminal, the one assigned to Sergeant Evans. It would have been in his personal effects returned to Mrs. Evans after his death. Of course. The box of mementos she'd been crying over. The terminal would have looked like a simple, ruggedized laptop to anyone else. Thorne had her, and he had the terminal. He had everything he needed. He's not going to the rail yard to get on a train, I said, the final horrifying picture coming into focus. He's using it as a mobile, shielded location to activate the AI. A moving container is a perfect Faraday cage, blocking most surveillance. He'll activate Chimera, transfer control to his employers, and then disappear with Maria as a hostage, or worse. Airborne Command, this is Strike 1, the pilot of my helicopter said. We have visual on the Harrisburg depot. I see one vehicle matching the description, a classic Mustang, parked near the gantry crane loading area. Take us down, fast and hard, I ordered. QRF team, prepare to deploy. I want a perimeter around that entire loading zone. Nothing gets in or out. The Blackhawks descended like angry hornets, their searchlights cutting through the darkness of the sprawling rail yard. We touched down 50 yards from the Mustang, the rotor wash kicking up a storm of gravel and dust. The QRF platoon rappelled down from both helicopters with practiced speed, fanning out, their rifles with laser sights painting the area in a web of deadly red dots. The rail yard, moments before a quiet industrial landscape, was now a sealed-off kill box. I leapt from the helicopter, my sidearm drawn, and moved towards the Mustang with the assault team. The car was empty, its driver's side door ajar. On the ground next to it was a woman's shoe, one I recognized from Maria's house. He'd brought her here. Check the containers, I yelled over the receding whine of the turbines. The soldiers began moving methodically through the rows of stacked shipping containers. Suddenly, one of the soldiers near the gantry crane yelled, "Contact! Blue container, second level." High above us, a single blue shipping container was being lifted by the massive gantry crane, slowly rising towards the freight train on the tracks. He was already in the process of loading his escape vehicle. "Set a sniper position," I commanded. "I want eyes on that container. Any sign of Thorne, you are cleared to engage. QRF, secure the gantry controls. Stop that crane!" As the soldiers swarmed the base of the crane, a new sound cut through the air, the sharp crack of a high-powered rifle. Not from our side, from the container. One of the QRF soldiers climbing the gantry ladder cried out and fell, his leg buckling. Thorne was armed, and he was dug in. "He's using the container as a pillbox," the platoon leader shouted into his comms. "We can't get to the controls without crossing his line of fire." The crane continued its slow, inexorable movement, positioning the container directly over the train. In moments, he would be loaded and gone. I looked at the situation, my mind a cold, strategic computer. We couldn't assault the container. We couldn't stop the crane. But I knew Thorne's profile. He was arrogant. He needed to win, and he needed his enemy to know he had won. "Patch me through to his comms frequency," I said to the comms specialist on my team. "Director Vance, can you do it?" "We've been trying, General." Her voice came back, strained. "He's using military-grade encryption. We can't break it." "You don't have to break it," I said. "Just find the frequency. I'll do the rest." I remembered something from our time at Bragg. Thorne had a tell, a specific, obsolete encryption algorithm he favored because he thought it was clever. I rattled off the specifications to Vance. A moment later, a voice in my helmet said, "We're in, General. You have an open channel." "Marcus Thorne," I said, my voice broadcast into his steel box. "This is General Eva Rostova. Your plan has failed. You are surrounded. Release Maria Evans and surrender." His voice came back, laced with static and a smug, infuriating confidence. "Eva, so glad you could make it to the party. I'm afraid you're a little late. The guest of honor is just about to perform." A woman's terrified sob echoed faintly in the background. It was Maria. "It's over, Marcus," I said, my voice level, betraying none of the rage I felt. "Whatever you were paid, it's not worth dying for." "Dying?" he laughed. "I'm not the one who's going to die tonight. You see, Ava, you were right about me. I am a student of history, and history teaches us that the side with the best weapons always wins. And I am about to unleash the greatest weapon ever conceived. Say hello to Chimera for me." He was stalling. He was trying to get Maria to speak the command phrase. I needed to stop him, and I needed to do it now. I looked up at the container, suspended in the air. I looked at the soldiers pinned down. I looked at the sniper trying to get a clear shot, and I knew there was only one way. "Sniper," I said into my private comm channel, "what's your status?" "Negative line of sight on the target, ma'am," the sniper reported. "The firing port is too small, but I have a clear shot on the main lifting cable, the one holding the container." My blood ran cold. "What's the probability of a successful shot?" "Under these conditions, 80%. But ma'am, if I sever that cable..." The container would drop 50 feet onto the train car below. The impact would be catastrophic. Anyone inside... "Do it," I said, my voice like stone. "Ma'am?" the sniper asked, shocked. "That is a direct order, Sergeant. Take the shot. Now." It was a terrible gamble. I was sacrificing Maria to stop Thorne. It was a commander's decision, brutal and necessary. I closed my eyes as I heard the deafening crack of the .50 caliber sniper rifle. For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the thick steel cable snapped, its frayed ends whipping through the air. The massive blue container, for one horrifying moment, hung in the air, weightless. Then it plunged downwards. It hit the train car with a cataclysmic boom of screeching, tearing metal. It didn't just land, it crumpled, one side caving in completely. Silence descended on the rail yard, broken only by the tinkling of debris. I ran towards the wreckage, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. "Medical team, move up," I shouted, my voice hoarse. The QRF team swarmed the wreck, prying at the buckled doors. They finally wrenched one open. The sight inside was one of utter devastation. Equipment was shattered, and there, amidst the wreckage, lay the body of Marcus Thorne, killed instantly by the impact. My eyes searched frantically for Maria, and then I saw her. She was huddled in a corner, miraculously shielded by a heavy server rack that had wedged itself into the wall, creating a pocket of safety. She was bruised, terrified, but she was alive. As the medics helped her out, she looked at me, her eyes wide with trauma and a dawning understanding. I had just ordered her dropped from the sky. I had gambled her life. I walked over to her as they wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Maria," I began, my voice thick with emotion. "I am so sorry." She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He killed David," she whispered. "He told me. He was proud of it." She looked from me to the wreckage of the container. You did what you had to do, General. You ended it. I had ended it. The conspiracy was broken. Chimera was secure. But the cost was immense. As I stood there in the cold, industrial chaos, I looked at the faces of the young soldiers around me, at the grieving widow I had almost killed, and at the body of a man I once called a friend. This was no victory parade. It was the messy, brutal reality of command. Weeks later, I stood in my dress blues at Arlington National Cemetery. I wasn't there for Marcus Thorne. I was there for Sergeant First Class David Evans. His death was no longer a suicide. He was being buried with full military honors, posthumously awarded the Distinguished Service Medal for protecting Project Chimera at the cost of his own life. I stood with Maria, who was no longer just a grieving widow, but a protected government witness and a hero in her own right. After the ceremony, after I had handed her the folded flag from her husband's casket, she turned to me. "What will happen now, General?" she asked quietly. I looked out at the rows of white headstones, a silent testament to the price of freedom. My career could have ended in that police station. My life could have ended in that rail yard. Instead, a new path had opened up. General Markwell had called me the day before. Because of my actions, I was being given command of a new task force, a joint operation between the DoD and NSA, designed to hunt down the foreign power that had employed Thorne. "Now, Maria," I said, my voice filled with a new, unshakable purpose. "Now, we hunt." I had been a pawn in their game. I had been a target. But I had survived. And in doing so, I had become the weapon they never anticipated. My name is Brigadier General Eva Rostova. My life was almost ended by a phone call to the police. But my war was just beginning, thanks to a single phone call to the Pentagon.